Hey guys, welcome back to Guys That Magic. It's me, it's Steven. And today I got David.
Yo, what's going on?
Today we're going to be taking a look at David's $100 upgrade to Blame Game, the Murders at Karloff Manor Commander Precon deck. David, are you excited for this?
So let me go ahead and throw it out there as a little bit of a disclaimer. Boros is probably my second least favorite color combination in all of Magic. I normally don't like Boros decks at all. However, I am actually a huge fan of this deck. And the reason why is because this isn't typical Boros. It's not like your go wide kind of strategy. It's also not your equipment strategy. It's a very unique way to play Boros. And I am completely in love with both the commander and the deck itself. So very excited for me to get to not only just upgrade this, but also play around with this deck too.
Wow, good start there. I'm kind of excited now. All right, guys, well, before we start, make sure you drop a like and make sure you are subscribed to stay tuned to all this awesome content we're going to be putting out for you guys here in the next few weeks. But yeah, David, let's go ahead and jump in. Talk to me about the commander you went with. Talk to me about your deck.
Yeah, so as always, or at least it seems like as always, there's two legendary creatures that they designed to helm the deck. I am going to be sticking with the face commander for this one, although I will admit I do actually think that the backup commander is very cool, and I'm going to keep them in this upgrade. They don't necessarily fit in 100% with what the deck wants to do, but there's still enough of a synergy and a payoff, plus the creature itself, Feather, has really good stats for her mana value, so she's going to continue to stay in the deck. But the one that I do think is really interesting is actually the face commander and the recommended one that you play with right out of the box. And that is going to be Nelly, Borca, Impulsive Accuser. So she is 2, a red, and a white for a total of 4 mana. She's a legendary creature human detective. She's a 2/4 with vigilance, and she has 2 abilities. The first ability says that whenever she attacks, you suspect target creature. Then you goad all suspected creatures. For those of you who aren't entirely sure yet because you haven't played around with this set or maybe you haven't been keeping up with spoilers, a suspected creature has menace and cannot block. So it's a little bit better whenever it comes to like an aggressive creature. It can get in, force your opponents to maybe block with 2 things instead of just 1 thing. And then, of course, suspected creatures themselves can't block, so you don't have to worry about that later on kind of getting in your way. The other ability with this card is that it says that whenever 1 or more creatures an opponent controlled deal combat damage to 1 or more of your opponents, you and the controller of those creatures each draw a card. So there's 2 kind of big things going on with this commander. The first thing here, Bang, is that she really encourages your opponents to kind of just hurt each other. She's doing a lot of the goad strategy that we've seen before, but this time around it's got a little bit of a twist, and I think that it actually fixes a lot of the issues with goad, because you can suspect your own creatures, meaning that you can actually give your own creatures menace, and that allows you to kind of put the pressure on your opponent in the case you get down to a 1v1 situation, which Go decks have always kind of struggled with in the past.
Yeah, that is very true. I do play a Go decks, and once you get to that one-on-one, it does become a little tough.
Yeah, so I really love that. And then also the fact that she is a card draw engine. Not only is she going to be encouraging your opponents to go beat each other up, and then, of course, making their creatures have menace and goaded as well. But I mean, the card draw aspect of things stapled onto a Boros commander, I am absolutely in love with everything about this card.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, let's go ahead and move on to some new toys you got here. So let's start with the creatures. What are we looking at?
Yeah, so the first 2 cards that I want to talk about are actually going to be from the main set. Now, Suspect is a mechanic that we haven't seen before, and obviously with that, there's not really a whole lot of support for it. But there are 2 really good cards that I did want to throw in this. And just as a little bit of a disclaimer, I don't think this first one is going to spike up in price, but I'm not so sure about the second one. So if you are watching this video, you may want to go out and pick up the second card I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. Yeah, so the first card here is Agris Ka, Spirit of Justice. He is 2, a red and a white for a legendary creature spirit detective. He's a 2/4 with double strike and vigilance, and it says whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. If it is suspected, exile it, otherwise suspected. So the reason why this card is really, really powerful is because whenever we do find ourselves in the later portion of the game, if we've suspected a bunch of our opponent's creatures, we don't want them having the ability to swing back at us at any point in time. So Argus Cost has the ability just to exile them out, which is fantastic. Also, in the early to mid game, in the case Argus Cost ends up kicking off and suspecting things, it synergizes really well with our commander because she goads all suspected creatures. The second card, and I do think that this one is going to spike up in price, is Delny Streetwise Lookout. She is 2 and a white for a total of 3 mana. She's a legendary creature, human scout. She's a 2/2, and she says that creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. She also has an ability that says if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. This synergizes so well with our commander because our commander has power 2 or less. We can suspect twice as many things. We'll also be able to draw extra cards. And then, of course, she also works with the last card we talked about, Agris.
I mean, two amazing cards there, David, for the additions. I will say I completely agree with you on that second card. Delny definitely should be picking that up soon. I have seen a lot of people starting to talk about it.
The next creature card is also a card that's still in standard. This one's still relatively new and kind of trying to find a price point for this. Another card that I would probably recommend pick up sooner rather than later. I don't think this is going to get a reprint anytime soon, and it's very good. But this is Roaming Throne. For 4 mana, you get an artifact creature golem. It is a 4/4 and it has Ward 2. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It is the chosen creature type in addition to its other types, and it also says if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. More than likely, you're going to just want to name human because that's what our commander is, and we do have enough humans in the deck to just make this work. What we're really trying to do is just double up on our commander's goading ability for us to be able to suspect things, and then also for us to be able to draw them cards.
Yeah, I love these first three, David. I'm kind of terrified to see what else you kind of threw in here.
Yeah, so we have 3 more creatures that we're going to go through. The first creature, this is going to be the last that directly supports our commander. This one's going to be focusing more so on that goad strategy. This is Baloth, Baradal Entertainer. He is 4 and a red for a total of 5 mana. It's a legendary creature elf shaman. He's a 2/5 and says creatures your opponents control with power less than Baloth's power are goaded. He also says that whenever a goaded attacking or blocking creature dies, you create a treasure token, and then he's got to choose a background, but that's just going to be flavor text in this deck. He's super powerful, not only because he's going to be goading our opponent's little things, but also because there are quite a bit of ways in this deck for us to actually increase our power and toughness for our creatures, give them a little bit of a boost, so we can start goading a lot more things and just really ensuing chaos for our opponent's board, while also now producing treasure tokens to help us ramp.
Yeah, plus I also love this card because it does come down as a 2/5. And what I love about it is if you have opponents that just continuously have these little mana dorks that never want to swing with them, they're gonna die.
Or they could just have them down before combat. But I mean, either way, it does get rid of the little mana dorks. Speaking about little creatures, the last 2 are going to go into our little creature support category. They basically do the exact same thing, and that is make sure that our commander can continue to attack without any fear of her dying, while also making sure that we protect our things. This first one here is Giver of Runes. She's a single white mana for a creature core cleric, a 1/2. She has an ability where you can tap her, and another target creature you control gains protection from colorless or from the color of your choice until end of turn. And very similarly, we are also going to be putting in Mother of Runes. She is a single white mana for a creature human cleric. She's a 1/1 that you can tap, and target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. If you do use this on your commander, you can name a color that your opponent has. Say, for example, if they've only got green creatures in play, you can name green, and then your commander will be unblockable to those green creatures. So it ensures that you'll be able to get in and deal that damage. These are both really powerful effects just because it can also help to keep our commander or just any of our other key pieces alive for longer.
Yeah, two really good additions. I mean, probably two of the best one-drop white creatures, I think, in Magic for protection. Well, David, it looks like that's going to wrap up our creature package. I'm sure you had some fun with some spells.
Absolutely, I did. I will admit, out of the box, there were 2 issues that I saw with this deck. Number 1, the removal package is not very good. So we're going to go ahead and bump up the removal package. We're also just going to bump up the overall caliber of our spells. And the first one that I want to talk about is really going to encourage some chaos, and that is Taunt from the Rampart. This is 3, a red, and a white for a total of 5 mana. It is a sorcery, and it says goad all creatures your opponents control until your next turn. Those creatures can't block. So this is going to force all of your opponent's creatures into combat, and they don't have to worry about dying for blowback because they're guaranteed to get in. None of your opponent's creatures can block. This also works double time for you since it doesn't actually go to your creatures, but it does mean all of your creatures are now unblockable.
That's pretty scary.
The next 2 cards are single target removal. that are probably good enough to just make it into every single white deck. Wizards of the Coast, I gotta admit, they were doing pretty good, including at least one of the two of these in the white precons for like the last year, but for whatever reason, neither of them made it here. The first card here is Swords to Plowshares. It's a single white mana for an instant that says exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. And then the second one being Path to Exile, a single white mana for an instant that says exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Both of these are incredibly efficient at what they do. Looking at the precon straight out of the box, it had a lot of like enchantment-based removal, things that you would get down into play and then kind of like tell your opponent, hey, don't attack me, otherwise I'm going to use this on your creature. And those are cool and all, but they tend to be a little too telegraphed for me, and they're also a little bit more mana intensive. Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile give you the flexibility of just having up that one single white mana and being able to feign the, hey, you may have it in your hand and you can use it in any given moment. The next card is going to be Stroke of Midnight. This is 2 and a white for an instant. It says destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. Same kind of thing here. Stroke of Midnight is a fantastic card. It deals with any non-land permanent, so anything that our opponent has that is really pesky. They are going to get a 1/1 out of it, but that's actually totally fine. We want them to still have creatures. So in a deck like this, that's actually an upside, because if we need to, we can suspect their little 1/1 or goad it.
That is hysterical.
We want an additional way for us to help close out the game, as well as just a way for us to potentially protect our things, although we really want to use this next card as a finisher. This is going to be a Chrome as well. It is 3 and white for an instant that says choose one. If you control your commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both. The first mode says the creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, and the second mode says creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. We are going to encourage our opponents beat each other to death, but at some point we are going to have to finish off at least one or two of our opponents and jump into the fight ourselves. So Chroma's Will really helps us to push our creatures over the edge and drop our opponent's life totals down to 0.
Yeah, Chroma's Will is probably one of the strongest cards. Especially when you have your commander out, you're able to choose both those modes. It's usually a game ender.
And then a card that I was actually very shocked not to see in this deck is Blasphemous Act. There was a different board wipe. We'll get to it later on. Surprise, it's going to be cut. But Blasphemous Act is a really interesting card here. It is 8 and a red for a total of 9 mana. It's a sorcery and it says it costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. It also says it deals 13 damage to each creature. Now, here is the thing. Yes, that is a big board wipe, and yes, it does have the potential to kill your things, well, unless they're bigger than 13 power, but chances are in a deck like this, they're not going to be. Part of the reason why I thought that this was really interesting, that this card was not included, is because this deck does run both Boros Reckoner and Brash Taunter in the Precon. Just to give you a quick heads up as to how those cards work, both of them have an ability where if they're dealt damage, they reflect that damage to a different target. So if we have those cards in play and we cast a Blasphemous Act, it means that we're swinging 13 damage potentially at an opponent's face.
That's kind of painful, David.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good synergy there. I was really shocked that Blasphemous Act was not included here.
Not gonna lie, I'm pretty shocked that a lot of these cards weren't included in the deck, but here we are. They're included now, David, and that's what matters.
There we go. We got there.
David, I love the creatures. I love the instants and sorceries that we've added. Did we add any lands?
We did. So this is the other weakness that I noticed with the Precon. I'm not sure what happened here, but there are like every colorless producing land I can ever even possibly imagine in this deck, straight out of the Precon. It is a 2-color deck, which does give us some flexibility. We can have some utility lands that tap for colorless, but it's almost like a third of the mana base for this deck. It is really aggressive. So we're going to cut down on some of those because the worst feeling in the world is playing a 2-color deck and not having our colors. The first card we're going to be including here is Sacred Foundry. It is the shock land of these colors. It is a land that is both a mountain and a plains. And it says whenever it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. Sacred Foundry is actually really important because we do have cards that specifically care about either a mountain or a plains. So for example, the Precon does include the Snarl. This just adds a little bit more to your basic land type count, so it'll help you out there. The next land that I added in was Sundown Pass. Sundown Pass is a land that says it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands, and you can tap it for either a red or a white. Nice little color fixing there. We have Spectator Seeding that I'm going to be throwing in this deck. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. So most of the time this should come in untapped, and it can tap for either a red or a white. I'm also going to be putting in a Forbidden Orchard. This is a fun little land. So it has the ability to tap to add for 1 mana of any color. And it says that whenever you tap Forbidden Orchard for mana, target opponent creates a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. So we're actually going to be giving our opponents creatures, but that's totally fine. We can goad them later on, or, you can just kind of use it a little bit of a politicking because that's what this deck wants to do anyways. Lastly, just to help this deck out a little bit, make it run a little bit more smoothly, I did add a just basic mountain. I felt that with this being a 2-color deck, we just needed access to, our colors a little bit more.
Love all the land additions there, David. I especially love the Forbidden Orchard. I feel like it's kind of tough because like Forbidden Orchard's a fun card to throw into some decks, but I think it really fits into this one.
Oh yeah, we don't care about giving our opponents things. In fact, actually, our commander is a little politicky anyways, and that she can draw our opponent's cards. So you can really use this as a way to make some friends, and of course make some enemies. But I mean, the best thing about friends is that your friends aren't friends with each other. So yeah, just be friends with everybody and let them, let them brawl.
Just be friends with me. Give me the 1/1s.
There you go.
Well, unfortunately, David, when we have additions, we also have some cuts to make. So let's go ahead and move on to your removals.
All right, so the first card that we're going to be cutting here is Ancient Stone Idol. It is a ginormous 10 mana. Don't worry, it doesn't always cost that, though. It is an artifact creature golem. It is a 12/12 with flash, and it says it costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature. It also has trample, and it says whenever it dies, you create a 6/12 colorless construct artifact creature token with trample as well. So there's a lot to unpack with this card. Yes, we are going to be goading our opponent's creatures. However, if our deck isn't really doing what it wants to be doing, this is a 10 mana dead card. I don't like this card. There are just better things that we could be doing in this deck. I would rather get a small utility creature out that's going to help us progress our game rather than just have like this gigantic surprise blocker, which I never want to use this for, or take advantage of us already making all of our opponents attack.
Yeah, I see why they added this card into the deck, but I also definitely see why you got rid of it.
For similar reasons, we're also going to be getting rid of Angel of the Ruins. She is 5 and 2 white for a total of 7 mana. She's an artifact creature angel. She's a 5/7 with flying, and she says that whenever she enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. She does have a final ability on here, and ultimately I think it's probably the best part of the card, and that is plane cycling for 2. Because 7 mana is just so much. There is no cost reduction on this card. It's a cool flyer. I'm never casting this thing.
Yeah, 7 mana is a bit intensive. I mean, the payoff is kind of interesting, but at the same time, I feel like there's ways to do that for cheaper.
Absolutely. I just feel like I was plane cycling this more than actually casting it. And at that point, it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, just throw a Return to Dust in there, you know what I mean?
We also are going to be cutting Solemn Simulacrum. The sad robot can go somewhere else. It is 4 mana for an artifact creature golem. It's a 2/2 and says whenever it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and you shuffle your library. It also says whenever it dies, you may draw a card. There is like a mild, kind of weird sub theme in this deck of you wanting to be hit. That's fine. However, realistically speaking, I don't want to be hit. I want my opponents to just like really hit each other. So I want to bump my goad, and I want to kind of get rid of some of the cards that are going to incentivize my opponents to attack me or kind of reward me whenever my opponents do attack me, if that makes any sense. Solemn Simulacrum is a fine card, but if we were playing a deck that wanted to be attacked, then I can justify including him here, but we're really trying to kind of change that. I'm also going to be cutting Lauren of the Third Path. She is 2 and a white for a total of 3 mana. She's a legendary creature, human artificer. She's a 2/1 with vigilance, and she says that whenever she enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. And then she's got another ability where you can tap her and you and target opponent each draw a card. That kind of mirrors what our commander is already doing. Yes, she's got a cool ability on the ETB. You can blow up an artifact or an enchantment, but she doesn't really actually do a whole lot past that point. If she had an attack trigger, then maybe I could justify it, but this is a card that I don't really want to be giving my opponents a ton of card draw. I know that I'm already doing that with my commander, and that's just kind of enough for me. The next creature we're going to be removing is actually one of the brand new creatures for this deck, and that is going to be Havoc Eater. It is 5 and 2 red for a total of 7 mana. It is a creature elemental. It's a 3/3 with flying, but it says that whenever it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, goad up to one target creature that opponent controls, and then you'll put X +1/+1 counters on Havoc Eater, where X is the total power of creatures goaded this way. Yes, it's 7 mana for a flyer, and yes, this thing is going to be completely just gigantic. However, I still can't justify a 7 mana cost spell. If you're new to this channel, I really don't like 7 mana spells. They need to be incredibly impactful and really push things over the edge the turn that they get played. It's cool that I'm goading a couple of things here, but even with this gigantic flyer, it's not winning me the game the turn that I'm casting this. I really needed this thing to have haste in order for it to stick in the deck, and at that point, I think it's probably a little too busted.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking that. I was like, if this had haste, my God, would not mind paying 7 mana for it. But without that haste, you just got a really big, beater that you got to wait a whole turn.
I've got a really big lightning rod for whoever's going to path this or just use removal on it. The final creature that we are removing from this deck is Anya, Merciless Angel. She is 3, a red, and a white for a total of 5 mana. She's a legendary creature angel. She's a 4/4 with flying. And she says that she gets +3/+3 for each opponent whose life total is less than half his or her starting life total. She also says as long as an opponent's life total is less than half his or her starting life total, Anya has Indestructible. This is a big beater that is sometimes a slightly bigger beater. I'm not really here for this. The vast majority of the time, this is going to be 5 mana for a 4/4 with flying with no other abilities, and that's just not good enough.
All right, David, I definitely like the removals here. I can only imagine you remove some pretty interesting cards as well, instant and sorcery wise.
Yeah, so remember how earlier I mentioned there's like this weird, if you attack me, there might be something bad happen to you? The first 2 cards that we're going to talk about here kind of fall into cutting some of that sub-theme. The first one here is Gideon's Sacrifice. This is a single white mana for an instant that says choose a creature or a planeswalker you control. All damage that would be dealt to you this turn and to permanents you control is dealt to the chosen permanent instead. So this is really cool if your opponents are swinging in and they have like a 20/20 and a couple of other little things or something like that. I don't know. They're just hitting you for a ton of damage. You can redirect that onto one of your other creatures. Now, obviously, in a deck like this, you really want to have either Boros Reckoner or Brash Taunter in play. That way you can target one of those and then just redirect all of that damage wherever you want it to go at whatever opponent. However, I did find that for the most part, this was just kind of like a weird fog effect where I never really necessarily like wanted to use it. It was never really like a good card in my hand that was progressing the game. It was more just like a gotcha. And that just wasn't good enough. And then the next card, this is one of the weirdest cards in all of Magic. I actually do really love this card. I used to sideboard this in Modern way back in the day. This is Deflecting Palm. This is a red and a white for 2 mana. You get an instant. And the instant says, the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, Deflecting Palm deals that much damage to that source's controller. So this is another one of those redirects. It's worded really weirdly because this actually gets around things like hexproof since you're not targeting. So it's a very fun card in very niche specific situations. I just don't really want another one of these like surprise kind of you got me style of effects instead of a Deflecting Palm. I'd rather just have a Path to Exile. Just deal with the thing that's coming at me instead of trying to be cute with it.
Yeah, I mean, I love this cut. I think this one makes perfect sense.
The next sorcery that I'm going to be cutting is Winds of Wrath. This is a 3 and 2 white for a sorcery that says destroy all creatures that aren't enchanted. They can't be regenerated. There are so many really good board wipes at this point for Magic. Winds of Wrath is a solid choice if you are in a very heavy enchantment deck where you're caring a lot about auras. We have 14 enchantments in this deck, which it's a pretty good amount. Whenever you really start to dive into it, only 6 of them are auras. I don't know. This card is just expensive, and there's a pretty good chance that our auras are actually equipped onto our opponent's creatures, especially in a deck like this. So, like, I really don't like Winds of Wrath here.
Yeah, not really certain why they added this in. Even if you just added a bunch in, the way this deck's wanting to go, it doesn't make much sense.
It would kind of maybe make sense to me if you were playing around with the backup commander. The backup commander here being Feather Radiant Arbiter. She is an Auras Matters commander, and that you want to be targeting her with auras because then they'll duplicate and target your opponent's things. But even in that case, Winds of Wrath is really weird because then you're still not killing your opponent's creatures, even if you're not killing yours. So I just don't get the point of this board wipe.
Get it out of here.
We just talked a little bit about enchantments. I'm going to be cutting 2 of those as well. The first enchantment I'm going to be removing is one of my favorite artworks in all of Magic. It is Seal of Cleansing. It is 1 and a white for a total of 2 mana. And the reason why it's my favorite is because it looks like he's like breaking a piece of like toast in half. I don't know. That's just the way that my brain works. It's what I've always thought was going on there. And just like the monster on the other end is like so disgusted by his act of defiling breakfast that he just like eviscerates himself. Anyways, though, so the card itself says that you can sacrifice Seal of Cleansing and destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's cool because you can have this sit around on the battlefield and just kind of project to the entire table that, hey, I've got a removal for you. If you swing at me, I'm going to do the thing, but I can pretend I have instant speed removal in my hand, and I like that more.
I am the butterer, the light that butters all bread.
There we go. We found a new flavor text for this card, too. The next one here is Soul Snare. I like this card actually much less. It is 1 mana, so it's a little bit cheaper, but it's an enchantment that says you can pay a white and sacrifice it to exile target creature that's attacking you or a planeswalker you control. That's very restrictive, and I have to have an extra white mana up, so this is twice as expensive as my preferred removal. Yeah, it's really not good. I don't want to have to wait for my opponent's big scary thing to have to be attacking me to get rid of it.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. If I want it gone, I want it gone when I want it. Well, I love the cuts we've made here with the instant sorceries and enchantments. You added some lands, or you're getting rid of some lands?
I am going to be cutting some lands. The first land that I'm going to be removing here is Boros Garrison. This is the land that always enters the battlefield tapped, and whenever it does, it returns a land you control back to your hand. Later on, it can tap for both a red or a white. There is a time and place for these lands. I like them in Graveyard Matters strategies. I like them in discard decks. I like them in decks in which I am running Kodama so that I can bounce these lands and then just like replay them a million times. I do not like them in Boros. I want to attack you and not be tripped up on my mana-based decks, though, and that's exactly what this is. So I'm not a big fan of this card. I don't like it in the early game. I don't like it in the mid-game. I really don't like it in the late game, so this one gets the axe.
Yeah, I remember one of my first games of Magic. I didn't really understand what these bounce lands were, and I played this turn 1.
Did you play it turn 2?
No. No, I learned my mistake the first turn.
Yeah, they're situational. They can be neat at times, but not here. As I mentioned earlier, there is a plethora of lands that only tap for colorless in this deck, and that's really weird. So the first one that we're going to be cutting is Ash Barrens. This is a land that taps for a colorless, but it does have basic land cycling, where you can pay 1 and discard it to go search your library for a basic land card. You know what's even better than this? The basic land card that this could have been had you just not paid 1 mana. So yeah, this card is getting cut. Up next, we have Kur Keep. This is a legendary land. You can tap it to add a colorless. You can also pay 1 and a red for a total of 2 mana. You can tap it and create a 0/1 red kobold creature token named Kobolds of Kur Keep. I love kobolds. I really want to love this card. I have always really wanted to love this card. One of my favorite precons of all time, way, 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 way back in the day, the Prosh precon. This came included in it. I have yet to find a way to make me like this card.
What do you mean? Super cute. Look at those two little kobolds down there, man.
Yeah, for the low price of, well, it's 4 mana, but you're tapping 3 lands twice to make 2 kobolds. So keep in mind, this is not just 2 mana for you to make the kobolds. You have to tap this land too, which means it's not producing mana. I think actually one of your favorite cards is up next here, and that's going to be Myriad Landscape. This always enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for a colorless, or later on you can pay 2 mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. It doesn't really super help fix my colors, at least unless I want to invest like 1,000,000 mana. And by 1,000,000 mana, I actually just mean 2, but I don't want to spend 2 mana to go and fetch for things. And I don't love how this always enters the battlefield tapped either. It's a slow land.
God, I love this card.
I knew you're the one who was really high on it.
Yeah, I really am. I'm not gonna lie. I love Myriad Landscape so much. I don't know why I do, but it makes me happy.
Up next, we are going to be removing Throne of the High City. This is a land that you can tap for a colorless, or you can pay 4 mana to tap it and sacrifice it. And it says you become the monarch. Now, I do understand why this card is included in the deck. Being able to have the monarchy is a pretty neat effect. And especially if you're goading your opponent's creatures, so maybe you're taking their big thing out of combat. That way it can't swing at you and steal the monarchy from you. That is pretty cool. It's very expensive for you to become the monarch, though, because that's kind of pseudo going to be like 5 mana, considering you do have to tap Throne of the High City and sacrifice it, as well as that other 4. I think we're already doing a really good job of inciting our opponents to just kind of attack each other, so I don't think we really need to include the monarchy. And I don't really want to add an extra layer of like directional combat of like where am I forced to attack based off of where the monarch has been like jumping around to. So Throne of the High City, sadly, I just don't think it's good enough.
You don't think paying 4, tapping this, and drawing a card at the end of your turn is good enough?
No, I don't.
All right, buddy. It's your deck.
And then the last card that I'm going to be removing from this, and probably my least favorite Magic card of all time, is Temple of the False God. That's right, it's a Precon, so you are guaranteed to get this card in here. I think this card has just as many reprints as Sol Ring at this point. One of these days, they will not include this card in a pre-constructed deck, and that will be the best day. But this is a land that taps for 2 colorless mana. Activate only if you control 5 or more lands. This is in your opening hand 1,000% of the time.
Every time, dude.
And you know what it does whenever you play it on turn 1? It does nothing.
Oh, I hate this card.
It is such a trap. I feel like new players absolutely love it because they see, oh my goodness, look, it's ramping me for 2. And what they don't realize is that it's also slowing you down by such a significant margin. And there is no feeling worse than having 4 lands in play and not being able to drop the 5th and knowing that one of your 4 lands is a Temple of the False God.
I mean, it's like you said, though, man. 10 times out of 10, this is literally in my opening hand.
Oh, it always is. It always manages to weevil its way in there.
All right, well, David, I think that's it, man. David, we gave you $100 for this deck upgrade. What are we at?
We are currently up to $105. This is where I get back to my warning to you. Go pick up Delny right now. Yeah, so that is going to do it for Blame Game. I actually, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, I love this deck. I think that this deck is a lot of fun, and that is really weird for me to say because Boros normally sucks. So if you're a fan of Boros, I know you're going to love this. If you're not a fan of Boros, I still know that you're going to love this. So bottom line there is go pick up this deck, and thank you for making it through our upgrade video.
Well, I greatly appreciate everything you did here, David. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around, watching the whole video. Go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let us know what you thought about David's upgrade. Were there cards he should have added? Were there cards he should have taken out instead? While you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to follow us on all of our other socials on Instagram, TikTok, and X. It is @GuysThatMagic for all of those. And one more time for all our patrons, we're going to go ahead and show them all real quick on the screen. Thank you guys so much for all your support. And if you guys want to join them, down below you'll also find a link to our Patreon. Greatly appreciate all the help and support everyone has given us. But as always, thanks for watching.
Later.